Hello, friends, and welcome to Mousterpiece Melodies, a podcast that's listening to the songs of Disney movies past and present. I'm Josh Spiegel.
And I'm Scott Renshaw. Thanks for joining us on this comprehensive and encyclopedic compendium of all things Disney music. Now playing from 2007, Enchanted.
And before we get into our discussion, thank you for listening. No matter how you're checking us out, we hope you like what you're hearing. If you are, we'd appreciate it if you could rate and review Mousterpiece Melodies on iTunes, Spotify, or whatever app you're using to listen.
That's right. Let everyone know how much you love the show and tell your friends to do the same. You can follow me on Blue Sky at Scott Renshaw, and you can read my film criticism at cityweekly.net.
And you can follow me on Blue Sky at Mousterpiece, where these days, we're just now, when this episode is out, we're in the beginning of June. We're knee-deep in the first round of the Ultimate Walt Disney Animation Studios Songs Bracket because I cannot stop myself and because Blue Sky does not have an internal polling feature. But hey, they've made all sorts of other great changes in the last few months. Anyway, the point is, if you're not following me on Blue Sky, you can't join in on the fun. Everybody's doing it. You should be too. That's how these peer pressure things work. Anyway, if you have any comments, questions, or opinions you'd like to share, you can always email me at mousterpiececinema@gmail.com. Now that all the housekeeping is out of the way, let's start talking about the songs of Enchanted. And to do that, we are thrilled to bring into the show a very special guest. She is the senior entertainment editor at Consequence, and she recently wrote a very enjoyable interview / reported feature about the 10th anniversary of a really wonderful piece of alternative comedy from the Chris Gethard Show. Yeah, I just want to very quickly shout it out because if you haven't seen One Man's Trash, you need to find it on YouTube, and then you need to read this piece because it was really, really funny. Liz Shannon Miller, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for the very enthusiastic plug. That was an article that I kind of pushed hard at work. I was just I just think this would be a great thing to do. I have no idea if I'll be able to get spoiler, but if I can, that'd be awesome. And it all worked out really well.
It did. All I will say is if people have not seen One Man's Trash, Chris Gethard, he's a very funny alt comic. It's him. There's 3 guests in this episode. There's Paul Scheer, there's Jason Mantzoukas, and as Liz just referred to, there's spoiler. There's one other person. You will never in a million years guess who it is, but the episode is very funny, and yes, you got to speak to that person, and it was really enjoyable to read. Anyway, I will also clarify, that person is not in the movie Enchanted, so it's nobody who is related to this film. But let's start talking about the songs of the 2007 film Enchanted. This is, of course, the movie directed by Kevin Lima, starring Amy Adams, Patrick Dempsey, Timothy Spall, Susan Sarandon, James Marsden, and more. It is all about the winsome young woman, Giselle, who lives in the animated land of Andalasia. And one day after she meets her true love's truest, Prince Edward, she meets a man who she falls in love with immediately. They're about to be wed, but Prince Edward's evil stepmother, Queen Nerissa of Andalasia, is so jealous and so worried that she's going to lose power if her stepson marries. She casts Giselle off to the mysterious land of New York City. This is where, if anybody remembers those old Pace salsa ads, you'd pipe in New York City. That's true. The point is, she goes to New York City. It's a classic fish out of water story. She meets a divorce lawyer. She has to learn about the concept of divorce and the lack of a happily ever after. But of course, she falls in actual true love with none other than McDreamy himself. Now, there are 5 original songs in Enchanted written by Alan Menken and Stephen Schwartz, the composing team behind a couple slightly less beloved but still kind of cult favorite Disney Renaissance films, Pocahontas and The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Now, before we get into the track-by-track discussion, as we like to do here, I want to start off for each of you, since we're approaching, in about a year and a half, the 20th anniversary of Enchanted, which means I have to realize that it's been nearly 20 years, which is it's making me grapple with things. Liz and then Scott, kind of cast me back. What was your initial experience seeing Enchanted? What was your initial reaction to the film back in 2007?
I feel I was seeing it as, a young adult, so not out of the teenager, I'm too cool for Disney phase, even though I really never had that phase. I feel like I was able to watch it with a fair amount of perspective on Disney as a concept, and I think that really enhanced my viewing of it at that time, because I was like, oh, it's really interesting to see Disney kind of poke fun at itself in a way that is weirdly meta, but also like Giselle also still feels like a viable Disney princess. So I feel like at the time I had some mixed feelings regarding some of the execution. I have one major issue with the plot that we can get into now, or I can save for a little later. But the overall experience was like, this is really fun and perfectly cast movie too. With one exception, I'm not a McDreamy fan. I'm sorry. Like just Dempsey rubs me the wrong way in ways I haven't been able to fully articulate. But aside from that issue, like I don't know if anyone's actually like figuring out what to do with James Marsden has felt like a failed experiment in Hollywood for years. But this is one of the few examples of like, hey, this is the perfect role for James Marsden. This is the perfect role for Amy Adams. Idina Menzel is really fun in this movie. Susan Sarandon is a perfect evil queen. Timothy Spall, like you see the animated Timothy Spall, and you're like, I bet that guy's played by Timothy Spall in the live action. And sure enough, like now, it works. A lot of it works really well for me.
Now I am curious though. Before I throw it over to Scott, I don't mind you starting off. What's your big issue with the plot in the movie?
My big issue with the plot is that I look at the production team, and it's all male, and I feel like that explains a lot. My biggest issue, which is that when I was in my princess era as a little girl, it was a while ago, but I vaguely remember this. When I was in my princess era, I wanted to be the princess. I did not want the princess to be my new mom. Like, I don't understand. There's just something fundamentally weird about that. Like, I don't understand how that resolution is meant to be a happy ending for the little girl involved. Like, I guess, like, Giselle is just a genuinely good person, so why shouldn't she be a great stepmom to her? But still, it's just, like, weird.
That's fair. Now, Scott, what about you? I assume you reviewed this back in the day in 2007.
Absolutely, and we also discussed it on the old show. I went
know
back
we
and
did.
saw
Yep.
And it was on the occasion of its 10th anniversary. So we have a theme here. It's like every decade or so, let's just come back and revisit this movie. Yeah. So I was fairly similar to Liz in that it was just a very enjoyable experience. That the songs, as we discussed, nailed the kind of song that they were trying to ape, in addition to being good songs themselves. That I loved Amy Adams. I still love Amy Adams in this movie. I think that she really nails it. And I'm glad Liz also brought up James Marsden, because this is, and I think this is something that we discussed at the time almost 10 years ago now, which is that he is unfortunately, well, not unfortunately for him, he is a stunningly handsome man who has been cast mostly in dramatic roles and is clearly a comedian. And we've seen, that was Jury Duty was a great example of that. Hairspray. Whenever he's allowed to be goofy and to be funny, that's when he really shines. And it's like for so many years with Brad Pitt, you're so handsome, and yet your real strength is being a comedian, and nobody is letting you do that enough.
Yeah, I mean, I forget exactly what I would have said nearly 10 years ago on the show. I saw this movie when I would have been 23. I saw it with my then fiance, now wife, and we were definitely we both were Disney fans overall. I, of course, it would come as a surprise to nobody, have always been a big Disney animation fan. So I was very excited for a movie that would playfully mock, but also pay homage to the animation legacy of the studio. And at the time, I think my initial takeaway was that there were 3 MVP performances in this movie that really elevate the material, which is not quite as good as those performances. James Marsden is hilarious in a role that retroactively, I look at it and I think it's basically, what if Andy Dwyer was a Disney prince? That's kind of what it feels like to me, because like there are certain moments in the script where it kind of feels like the movie is trying to do a less nasty Gaston in terms of what James Marsden's being asked to play. But at the end of the day, like, he's basically a big puppy dog of a character. He doesn't grasp what a date is. Obviously, Giselle barely does as well. You know, I always forget about the image of him wearing the Statue of Liberty hat that I now associate with. I now think of when I think of Elsbeth, the CBS show. And by the way, if there's anybody out there who watches Elsbeth, one of the recurring detectives from that show appears very briefly in this movie in the soap opera clip. There's the brief soap opera clip, which Disney fans probably know because the woman in that scene is played by Paige O'Hara, who voiced Belle in Beauty and the Beast, one of a bajillion different Easter eggs in this movie. But the guy she's talking to is one of the detectives from that show. And it's just, I had never thought about that before, but I watching it a few days ago, I was like, is that Detective Smolin? And hopefully somebody out there knows what I'm talking about.
Well, I watched Elsbeth, but I don't remember any of the detective names. Which one is he?
He's the guy who's, if you watched the episode recently with the wig maker played by Jeff, I forget the guy's last name, the guy from Somebody Somewhere, he's the detective who is worried about being balding in the one episode. He's a bit more of the gruff masculine type who's...
So is he the one who nearly got retired?
No, that's a different actor.
That makes, I think I know who you're talking about now. Thank you.
Okay. And yes, it blew my mind watching it and being like, oh my God, I can't believe it's that actor. He looks much younger in this movie. Anyway, so I think that his performance is really funny. Timothy Spall is amazingly funny in this movie. I always love, among the many wonderful moments that he has, speaking of the soap opera scene, because it comes right after that, where he looks at at Prince Edward, and he says, "Sir, do you like yourself?" And then there's a brief pause, and he says, "What's not to like?" Which is a perfect distillation of both characters, I think. And then, of course, there is Amy Adams. I said as much on Blue Sky a couple of days ago. It is so phenomenally stupid to me that Amy Adams did not win the Academy Award for Best Actress for this movie. She didn't get nominated. And it's also interesting to note, because somebody replied to me and it's like, yeah, it's just as stupid as her not winning for Arrival, and she's excellent in Arrival as well. And that, I think, is the other movie where she didn't even get nominated. She's been nominated for so many other movies. Amy Adams absolutely should have been nominated and won for Enchanted. We always, Liz, for your awareness, by the end of the show, we're going to look at the Oscars, because this movie did get 3 Academy Award nominations, all for their songs. I'm going to run down the nominees of the 2007 Best Actress category, and I'm here to tell you guys, she should have won. I've watched all 5 of the performances that got nominated. Amy Adams should have won. Just think, if Amy Adams had won here, maybe she wouldn't have been in movies with either future or past vice president characters. Like, I literally was looking at her filmography today. I'd forgotten that Vice and Hillbilly Elegy are not only on her filmography, they are literally consecutive films in her filmography. And listen, Amy Adams is so good here, I can almost forgive her for being in those films. Now, admittedly, I've only seen Vice. I could not bear to watch Hillbilly Elegy even when it was released, but Vice was pretty terrible. But
I want to say, though, that not to defend that movie at all, because that feels wrong, but the point of Vice isn't to say what a great guy Dick
True. That is true.
If only he had been if only he had actually become president one day.
that is a fair point.
Yeah, I'm not saying anything about Hillbilly Elegy, because, like you, I have not seen it, because why would I do that to myself?
Exactly.
But on the subject of Vice, I will offer that one defense.
That is a fair point. Now,
I'm the one who does those things to myself because I have to.
Thoughts and prayers, Scott. That's what I'll say. But anyway, so she's amazing in Enchanted. And the reason why the Oscar point, I think, comes up, this movie is narrated briefly at the start and end, naturally, fittingly, by Julie Andrews as, a person who you don't automatically associate with Disney princesses, but of course with Mary Poppins, the role that made her a movie star, the role that netted her an Academy Award for Best Actress. And I call out the performances because, especially with Amy Adams, if her performance doesn't work, this movie fails on its face. Because I would actually say, it's funny, Liz, you mentioned you have an issue with McDreamy. Now, I don't remember exactly what Scott and I said about Patrick Dempsey in our episode in 2017. At that time, I had watched none of Grey's Anatomy. At some point during the pandemic, my wife decided to start watching the, I think, 47 seasons of Grey's Anatomy. And I initially was not willing to sit down with her and watch it, not because I don't like watching shows with her, but because I'm not a big hospital procedural person. And anytime I sit down with her and it's like, oh, here's a baby who's in some serious like health situation. They're in the NICU. And if you haven't watched Grey's Anatomy, that's a show where babies sometimes die. And I personally was just like, nope, not interested. Life's too short. I don't want to watch something like that. It makes me very uncomfortable. At some point later in the last few years, she decided to restart the show because she never actually got through all the seasons. And this time I sat down with her and I realized, oh, Grey's Anatomy, as I'm sure many of our listeners know, is a soap opera as much as it's a procedural. It's easy to get invested in the characters. But even watching that show, I was like, I get why Patrick, like I have eyes. I understand that physically Patrick Dempsey is a handsome man. But boy, does he seem annoyed at everybody all the time. I just felt like his performance on that show was not as compelling or charismatic, and it made me think of his performance here, where, to his credit, I guess, the character of Robert Phillip, because that's his character's last name, by the way. I had not realized that I assume is a tie-in to Disney Prince characters. Robert Phillip.
Sure.
The most boring name a man can have. Robert Phillip.
Well, I feel like we've all decided as a culture never to trust men with two first names.
I'm fine with that rule. But my point is, he has a very dull character to play. It's obviously not Patrick Dempsey's fault that his character is the straight man, the wet blanket. He's for a long time meant to be pushing back on all of Giselle's conceptions about love and about life, partly because he occupies the real world. She doesn't grasp some nuances or complexities. I get that. But at the same time, like, it's funny, Scott, when I posted my thing about Amy Adams winning the Oscar, one of the things Blue Sky does that I like is it lets you search past posts. So I was like, oh, have I posted this before? I looked up Enchanted among my posts. The last time I had posted was in reply to you, because you had said something to the effect of James Marsden has played a lot of the other guys. Like he's played the Ralph Bellamy in other movies where you don't dislike his character, but you also don't want him ending up with the leading lady. And you used Enchanted as an example. And I replied to you and I said, I'm not sure I entirely agree because I get why the script wants him to not end up with Giselle. But the way the three of those actors are, it's like, no, she has more chemistry with James Marsden. She has none, in my opinion, with Patrick Dempsey, and it's not Amy Adams' fault, in my opinion.
Yeah, I feel like his casting in this case was a real example of like that Grey's Anatomy wave pushing him forward. But I also, there have been a fair number of behind the scenes reports that he's just not a good person. And I feel like I want to believe that this is me, my subconscious dislike of him is taking but
perhaps. And before we do the track by track thing, the other thing I don't think I'd noticed before, obviously this movie features once all three of the characters, Giselle, Prince Edward, and Nathaniel, arrive separately in New York City, they all arrive through the same manhole cover in Times Square. And they clearly filmed it in Times Square in 2006. And I know that for a fact because not only is there a shot at one point of James Marsden standing in front of a billboard for Hairspray on Broadway, not the movie version, but there's also a shot of him standing on a city bus. And if you look carefully, there's a billboard for Superman Returns behind him. And if you don't remember Superman Returns, that's a film featuring James Marsden as the other guy, which I just thought was a very funny coincidence. Now, getting to the songs, as I mentioned, 3 of the songs in this film got Academy Award nominations. Having said that, I have an odd relationship with the songs in this movie because I feel like the songs are used perhaps a bit more sparingly than they should be. 2 of the songs are not performed by any of the actual cast members in this movie, unless you count the one little bit of McDreamy singing along to one of those songs near the end, which I understand why it happens within the story, but for the most part, it's a song performed by somebody else. One of the songs is performed primarily in the animated section. And it feels, even though this is not a terribly long film, the use of songs in this movie feels a little cautious, which is interesting since at least one of the Oscar nominated songs is excellent. I think it is a great musical sequence, and it kind of hints at how much more fun it could have been if it felt more all in. Like Scott, you and I have talked about Mary Poppins before, speaking of Julie Andrews, a movie that goes all in on the songs. This, I think, is a little tentative in a way. I don't know if either of you felt the
same. In most of the Disney songs, certainly of the more modern era, 5, 6 original songs is about typical. That's not, it's not as though it was pulling its punches based on some sort of established model. I think I wouldn't have minded another song or even another couple of songs, but I also think that there were some very specific choices being made regarding the kinds of songs they were honoring / aping / paying homage to, and that once that thing was done, it was sort of a, wipe hands, my work is done here. And so the idea that there was some other note to hit, both musically and just sort of, in kind of storytelling terms, I've never really had that problem. I think it's typical of just musicals in general. It feels weighted heavily towards the beginning, and then you have a long stretch without any songs, and you're wondering, where are they?
Mm-hmm.
Well, also talking about the song, like it's 5 songs, but only 3 of them really get a full proper, these are characters singing the songs out loud on screen staging. The other 2, like the 5th song is a post-credit song, is a credit song essentially, and the 4th song is played as they are dancing at the ball, but it doesn't really. It's not like you could literally drop any song into that, and it would still have the same impact.
Well, and also Disney theme park people like Scott and myself, at least for me, I don't know, Scott, if you feel the same way, that 4th song, I don't really think of when I think of Enchanted. I think of when I think of World of Color. We'll talk about why that's the case later. But so let's start though talking about that first song. So again, the movie begins with about 10 or so minutes of animation, hand-drawn animation, courtesy of the James Baxter Animation Group. It's not even Disney Animation proper doing it, but that's okay. We start in Andalasia, where Giselle lives happily in this, quintessential princess. She lives basically in a nice treehouse. She wants to meet her true love, and she is envisioning how she will meet some man and they will share true love's kiss. That is the title for that first song, which she and Prince Edward sing. It's a bit of a riff on really a combination of classic Disney songs. It's a bit of a riff on Once Upon a Dream from Sleeping Beauty. It's a bit of a riff on So This Is Love from Cinderella, on I'm Wishing / One Song from Snow White. And I like the music of it a lot. The lyrics are good, but I was thinking to myself, one of the interesting challenges when you have modern filmmaking trying to pay homage to old-fashioned filmmaking is there's some of the lyrics are a little more knowing, a little more satirical. And I think it also speaks to one of the interesting balances that this movie is trying to strike. If you look into the history of the making of the film, the original script is a lot more adult. Credited to the same guy who actually is credited here, Bill Kelly. But originally, for example, when Giselle arrives in New York City, she is mistaken for a stripper. That is not quite what happens in this version of the movie, as I'm sure you can imagine why. But because of that, even the lyrics in this song feel a little bit stuck between how playful can we get, how biting can these lyrics be? And it actually made me think when, it's funny, talking about anniversaries, we are a few weeks away from the 30th anniversary of the aforementioned Hunchback of Notre Dame, which, if you have ever paid attention to my work online, first of all, bless your heart. Second of all, you may know that I did an oral history for /film of the Hunchback of Notre Dame. I had the great fortune of speaking to both Alan Menken and Stephen Schwartz about the making of that film and of its immensely incredible songs. At the time, Stephen Schwartz happened to be writing the songs for the sequel to this movie, Disenchanted. And I wish I had the transcript in front of me. I remember that he made mention of the fact that they were struggling with how edgy the lyrics could be. There was a specific lyric he was talking about where it like made, I want to say it made reference to having diabetes or something as a joke. And they couldn't even include that because the legal team was like, oh, no, that's too much. We insult people who have diabetes. I think that was what it was. It's not I don't believe I included it in the final draft, but I remember hearing that and thinking, wow, Disney's, unsurprisingly, they're very worried about insulting people for no good reason. And I think about it here because the lyrics in this song feel like they kind of want to get a little edgier. The thing about the lips, like the constant reference to lips in this song makes sense because it's about kissing. But also you kind of feel like Stephen Schwartz is trying to be a little more playful, a little more adult with some of the lyrics, but he can only go so far. What do the two of you think of this song?
Go ahead, Liz.
I feel like it's. I feel like I'm in line with everything you're saying. I think it's just saccharine enough to play like parody if you're looking for it, but if you aren't looking for it, and if you just want to embrace it as like a pretty song, I think it also does still work. And that is a credit to all the millions of man hours and meetings that I'm sure went into this movie to calibrate exactly the right level of satire they were allowed to get away with. Because I think the version of the movie you're talking about, or the darker version of this movie, really would tear at a lot of fundamental core values of like the Disney princess model. And I can understand why Disney would not necessarily want to greenlight that. The fact that this movie does as much as it does on one level is something like I really appreciate. But there is a part of me that kind of wishes I could see the darker version. And I think I do think the song serves well as an opening establishment of exactly the level of satire you're going to get, and the level of self-awareness that's going to be present.
Yeah, I mean, it's my least favorite of the three primary character songs, and I think part of it is a little bit of what Josh is referring to. I mean, Stephen Schwartz as a lyricist has written some of my favorite lyrics of all time, and you can tell that this isn't, that even some of the others, they're. I just, I love the lyrics of Happy Working Song and the way that he can play with the rhymes and that. But this one is just, it feels more about what it. I think there's a difference between the songs that stand on their own, regardless of what they are paying homage to, and those that are just like, oh, I get that this is the generic princess, I'm in love song, or I want to be in love song, without any reason for me to want to listen to it just because it's a good song to listen to. It's just cute. And that's, and frankly, I like the version when, we actually have the reunion, in the real world, and he wants to have the song continue and she doesn't get it. She's not picking up the cues that it's time for her to follow up with her duet. And, so that the mini reprise is actually my favorite part of this song. And I would much rather have a little bit more of that sort of when they're not clicking the way that they're supposed to because things have changed for her.
And I'll say one thing about the brief reprise you're talking about. What I like about it, and I noted it this time, it's like, well, you can tell that was actually James Marsden on set singing in that moment. Not that I didn't think he could sing. I've seen Hairspray, but like you can tell that's not like, oh, they ADR'd it afterwards. Like, no, they might have, but it sure sounds like that's literally him right there singing to her, and it's a nice, refreshing thing to see. But anyway, so after their initial song, as mentioned, Giselle and Prince Edward, in spite of all of Nathaniel and Queen Nerissa's machinations, the two of them meet. They immediately fall in love. They're going to be married. But as mentioned, Queen Nerissa, she turns herself into an old hag, a la Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. She gives Giselle, she tries to stop Giselle on the way to the wedding. She pushes her into an enchanted well that sends her straight into New York City, into Times Square. Giselle is obviously confused and overwhelmed about everything. We have a brief gag that, feels like the Disney version of the joke from the movie Elf, where Will Ferrell sees Peter Dinklage and, among other things, says, oh, he's an angry elf. We have that little bit there where she looks at him and says, grumpy, which, if you wanted to think hard about this, it's like, so does Snow White exist in the world of Andalasia? I will say, and I'm not going to nitpick here, this movie has so many plot holes. I know that I'm not supposed to think about them. I won't go into them here. This movie has so many plot holes. Anyway, so she goes there. She tries to figure out how to survive in this strange new place. She sees an old man who, steals from her. She sees what she thinks is a castle. It's an ad for a casino. And at the same time, she is intercepted by the very confused but kind enough divorce lawyer, Robert Phillip, as mentioned before. He is hesitating about proposing to his girlfriend, Nancy, played by the aforementioned Idina Menzel. And here's what I'll say. I know, Liz, you were saying you liked her in this movie, and she's fine in this, but even at the time, because this was a few years after Wicked had premiered on Broadway. This was a couple of years after. It's funny. I've never seen Rent on Broadway, but my wife is a fan, so we saw the movie in 2005. So I was watching it, and I'm like, so she's going to sing at some point, right? Because that's Elphaba. Like, why wouldn't you have her sing? And she doesn't. And I know I was reading into it at the time. Idina Menzel said she was actually flattered that she doesn't sing because it showed that she was being cast simply on her acting ability, which I get that. But also, everybody knows you because of stuff like Defying Gravity. Like, speaking of Stephen Schwartz, speaking of that connection. Mm-hmm. And I will also say, I think it's very funny that Disenchanted wildly overcorrected, because if you have seen Disenchanted, Nancy sings in that movie, because not just that she'd been in Wicked, but of course the Frozen movies. And then she ends up getting like the biggest possible ballad in Disenchanted.
Yeah.
But anyway, she's here. We get to see her say, "Hey, girlfriend," at one point, which made me laugh. The point is, Robert's got a daughter, a 6-year-old daughter named Morgan. His wife has left. He's got this girlfriend, Nancy. He kind of thinks he wants to propose, but they've been together for a while. He's hesitant. They see Giselle on the way home from his office. He allows her into his apartment. Immediately, things go pear-shaped because Nancy sees, hey, here's my boyfriend with this strange but beautiful redhead. What's the deal? She is understandably very angry at first. And after Robert expresses his anger at Giselle, an emotion that Giselle at the time does not understand, he leaves, and Giselle is on her. Well, I'm sorry. Before all of the stuff with Nancy goes on, Giselle wakes up in Robert's apartment, sees that it's a big mess, and decides she's got to clean things up. Back in the animated world, she had all sorts of woodland creatures like mice and raccoons and squirrels and et cetera, et cetera. But here in New York, well, she's got rats and cockroaches and pigeons who she calls with her powerful voice so that they can all sing a happy working song. That is, of course, the second of the 5 songs in this movie. And again, a clear riff on stuff like Whistle While You Work from Snow White, on things like A Spoonful of Sugar, on the work song from Cinderella. And it's I think this is a song that's very funny, more visually than lyrically, because the lyrics are good. It's a fun, bouncy, quick song. But what mostly makes me laugh is just watching, I'm sure they're almost all, if not entirely all, CGI New York creatures. Before we had Pizza Rat, we had the animals here. We had the rats here cleaning stuff up. It's a funny bit. I think, though, the song is funny enough, but it's the way that Kevin Lima directs the scene that makes it a lot funnier. Like, listening to it by itself, I don't think it works quite as well. But it's a good song. It's definitely better than True Love's Kiss. What do the two of you think of Happy Working Song?
Well, one thing I want to go back to really quickly is the casting of Idina Menzel and not having her sing. I just wanted to shout out that this is a phenomenon not exclusively to Enchanted. Mm-hmm. There were. I just want to say the hit TV show Smash. But Smash would do this all the time. Smash casts so many luminaries of musical theater, including like a good percentage of the original Rent cast, in supporting roles, and they never sang in the show. It was incredible. It was beautiful. It was a feat. The Smash was a perfect show that did nothing wrong ever. Anyway, I hadn't really thought about the fact that so much of the fun of Happy Working Song is really based in the visuals until you brought that up. But I do think you're really right about that. Like, listening to it out of context, you're hearing the lyrics are funny, in the context of, oh, a bunch of roaches and sewer rats are cleaning up an apartment. But they don't have the same pop without the actual video.
I mean, yes, but I mean, I'll push back enough just because I think that the performance is really engaging, and I do listen to it as a song on its own, but I think this is actually a much better example of how they were able to, at least edgy may be pushing it, but at least when you have the song end with the pigeon eating one of the cockroaches, that was like, oh, I didn't think they were actually going to go there. And I think that there was a little more willing to go there in this song that I think indicates that collision of the two worlds in a more interesting way. And again, I think it allowed Schwartz to be a little bit more playful with the lyrics, although I'm still not quite sure, based on what we know of the magic of Andalasia, how Giselle actually knows what a toilet is. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's a whole other thing, but I mean, she seems to know what mildew and toilets are as she's going through this process, but I don't know if this is actually something that would have been part of her world.
She does seem surprised and amazed by the shower.
Yes.
So maybe indoor plumbing has only gotten so far in Andalasia. The other thing I wanted to say is that this is the song. This song is like Amy Adams' real first chance to prove that she can be a Disney princess in live action form, and she nailed it. Like that is, I think, a big factor in the song. Like beyond the satire of this is a performance moment, like you were just saying, and yeah, it really comes out in that.
Undeniably, again, it's performance-wise, it's a very big success. Even if, again, it's one of those where the song by itself, like so many of the great Disney princess songs, you can listen to without saying, well, I have to watch it right now for it to work. This one, I think you really have to watch the scene for the overall number to work. Now, I don't think that's automatically true of the next song, but after Nancy sees Giselle, immediately freaks out, understandably so. There's a little bit of makeup that has to happen. Giselle, of course, at that time is like, oh, I would be horrified if I caused the two of you to separate or something like that. I wouldn't want to be the other person in this relationship. So she goes to work with Robert. She meets, speaking of part of your world, she meets Ariel because Jodie Benson, who voiced Ariel, plays Robert's assistant. I had forgotten anew that the one divorce or separation story that we see Robert dealing with, the man in that relationship, is the recently deceased Isaiah Whitlock Jr. I will allow all of you to just go to YouTube, type in Clay Davis, The Wire. You'll appreciate why he was a great actor overall, but that's the role that I associate him with most of all.
But he was never going to be able to say the word he is best known for. In this movie.
I know.
I don't know what your podcast rating is, but
you can swear. It's okay. Go ahead.
We can do one memorial in his honor.
Yep, one memorial. It's a great character, great show. And by the way, I did want to note with the kind of the running story with him and his wife, the idea is that the outset, we see the two of them, they're arguing, they're just ready to divorce each other. Among other things, they're arguing over quote unquote Hank. And Robert learns that Hank is in reference to a rookie baseball card for Hank Aaron. And McDreamy's like, a baseball card? And I thought, yeah, a rookie Hank Aaron. That's probably pretty valuable, buddy. You'd think that you as a divorce lawyer would know that.
They are talking about it like it is
a person. Yes, that is true.
I do like the image of Isaiah Whitlock Jr. like taking this, obviously framed rookie card, like cuddling up with it in bed.
That is funny. So anyway, so they're in this second time around when Giselle's there, this soon to be divorced, but maybe not couple. They think that Giselle is there as some kind of weird prank or some negotiating tactic. They're of course horrified. McDreamy's boss is very angry at him as well. They kind of briefly throw a bone to, oh my God, his job, he takes it too seriously, but also he might lose everything, but they don't really go all in on it, a la a movie like Elf. Because again, this movie does, if I think about it too hard, this movie does kind of follow a lot of the beats of a movie like Elf, which I think is better overall. But anyway, so after this brief, Robert decides, it's time to take Giselle. He walks her through the Central Park, and he's like, no, you know what? We can't be together. I'm going to give you a little bit of money. You go your separate way. I'm going to deal with my problems. And then, of course, he immediately sees her start to feed the birds. She's going to give some money to an old lady to feed the birds. And he's like, nope, hang on. Let me steer you away from giving my money to somebody I don't want you to give it to. They talk a little bit more. And Giselle learns that Robert and Nancy have been together for a few years, but they haven't actually proposed. They haven't gotten engaged. And the flip side, of course, is that Giselle was ready to get married to Prince Edward after one day, which means this is not just the first. This is the first of two different Disney musicals featuring Idina Menzel with a main character who is a redhead who is chided for falling in love with someone she just met. Coincidence, but I still have to point it out. And this leads into the next big song, the biggest production number of the movie, because for Giselle, she doesn't need to wait for 5 years. She knows that Edward is her true love. That's How You Know is the name of the song. I would say this is undeniably the best song in the movie. It is the song where they clearly poured in a lot of effort to setting it up, to getting this big production number, lots of dancing. Amy Adams sings it. She is credited with Marlon Saunders, who is the performer with the marimbas who kind of starts singing it with her. This is a great piece of music. I really do think this is a great song. It balances the playful but old-fashioned sensibility in the lyrics and in the music, and Kevin Lima stages the dancing really, really well. Unquestionably the best song for me in the film. What do the two of you think?
I feel like I'm really glad you called out Marlon Saunders, because his contributions to the song like really help it pop in just vocally. But in general, yeah, I think it's undeniably the best song of the soundtrack. It is especially for it is the least ironic of all the songs. It is, well, maybe I don't know, like maybe not compared to the other two, but it is definitely like full-hearted. We are just going to be a great love song. And the only real trace of irony, postmodernism, is Patrick Dempsey's going to be kind of a stick in the mud about it most of the song, and he'll catch himself dancing towards the end, and he'll be like, "Oh, I guess my cold heart can melt at some point." But yeah, it's a banger, and it's one I like. I remember I woke up the morning after watching this for preparation for this podcast, and I was like, oh yeah, it's going to be stuck in there in my head for a little while yet. And what was the other thing I wanted? Oh, I think it's interesting. It's an interesting song too, because she's singing. It's based on this faulty premise of like, that's how you know I'm an expert in love because I fell in love with my true love in one day, and so let me like. It's based on a complete fallacy in theory, but at the same time, like it is a song. I'm curious, like if I had a Janet from The Good Place here, I would love to ask her, like, how many times has this song been used in any sort of wedding processional, like any sort of wedding situation, ceremony? And I'm sure the number is in the millions.
I mean, it is a wonderful song. It does a lot of that great Stephen Schwartzy stuff, that stuff using internal rhymes. I just love you got to show her you need her, don't treat her like a mind reader. Each day. Yeah. There's those kinds of things that are like, this is the stuff that I'm looking for. But I think what's also great about, I do love the concept of the fact that she's creating this world following with her where people, break into song and dance that, Robert doesn't understand at all. Like, how do they know? They know the song is like, that was
great.
How does everybody else know this song? But it's interesting that you describe it as a love song, because I guess it kind of is, but really this is Under the Sea. This is the showstopper. And this is again why I think the movie is interesting, in that it sort of tracks the entire Disney history to that point in its songs. It sort of goes from the classic, the golden age era, and then it has the songs that are much more in keeping with the Renaissance era, and it's like this is Under the Sea. It's not really, I mean, I guess it is technically a love song because it's about love, but it's not between the two characters who are in love at that point anyway. And I think it serves that showstopper function much more than it serves the love song function, and it does it in a way that shows that having a showstopper is weird in the real world, and yet it's also undeniably catchy. And that, I think, that's what's great about it to me, is that it does that thing where it goes, as much as you want to resist it, you can't. You can't resist what a great showstopper does, which it gets you to sing along and you wave your jazz hands in the air and do all those things that this kind of song does.
Yeah. And I did want to note, if anybody listens to this song and thinks, boy, that Marlon Saunders, I feel like I've heard his voice before. Maybe you are a fan of the Sonic the Hedgehog video game. Speaking of a James Marsden connection, Wikipedia tells me that he performed the theme song for Knuckles in Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2. That was a few years before Enchanted. I do not know those specific games, but maybe you do. The point is, yeah, he's a lot of fun. And as Scott said, it's a very Under the Sea inspired song. There's obviously a number of other showstoppers you could think of that this would apply to, but really, especially with that, the rhythmic style of the music that Saunders adds, I think it really does have the Under the Sea inspiration. So the thing is, though, as we've talked about, there's only 5 songs, and it feels like a long period between when this song happens and when the next song happens. Now, during this sequence, Giselle and Robert see that there is a big ball coming up, a Kings and Queens ball, that Giselle encourages Robert to invite Nancy to. Nancy is thrilled. She thinks it's a spontaneous romantic gesture. She's very excited to go. It's going to be the following night. At the same time, Nathaniel has been tasked by Queen Nerissa to take one of 3 poisoned apples, naturally, to get Giselle out of the picture. He does so in a way it's very fitting that this movie pays homage to Disney animation by having outlandish cultural stereotypes as embodied by Timothy Spall. In one scene, he is an Eastern European vendor of terrible apples. Yes. In one scene, he works in an Italian restaurant, a la Lady and the Tramp. And he gives her an appletini that she inadvertently spills and is not able to drink. And then later in the movie, it goes by so quickly that you can almost forget about it. But at one point, you see him calling into an advice talk show because he's really in love with Queen Nerissa, who can't stand him. She manipulates him and uses him. He calls in. He is dressed as a cabbie, I believe as an Indian cabbie, and he's not speaking in a cartoonish Indian accent, but it's
a choice.
It's a choice. And I think, speaking of things they wouldn't do now, I don't think that would have happened in the sequel now. But anyway, around the same time, Edward finally finds Giselle. As Scott mentioned, Edward is still very much in love with Giselle. Things do not line up correctly. Giselle realizes she's not singing with him anymore. She's maybe starting to get lured in. She's getting attracted to the real world. Of course, she's really getting attracted to McDreamy. And I did want to call out, my favorite moment in this movie is not musical. I remember very vividly in theaters thinking that this was the moment where it's like, this is a person who deserves an Oscar. There's a bit where Giselle and Robert are talking, and Robert is continuing to push back on the notion that you can't immediately fall in love. You can't have a happily ever after naturally. Romance is work, that it takes time. And Giselle gets angry at him, and she realizes that she's getting angry. And in the span of like 10 seconds, you see a wave of different emotions, from anger to shock to delight at the fact that she's feeling something different, to surprise because Giselle realizes that the fact this man is making her angry might actually be a hint that she is falling in love with him for real. In the span of like 10 seconds, you see all of these emotions go through Amy Adams' face. I remember in theaters thinking, man, that is a really challenging bit of acting that she makes look so easy. Mm-hmm. Especially since, as I've already said, she has so little chemistry with Patrick Dempsey in this movie. The era of McDreamy, it just feels like, yeah, that was also a choice for mid-2000s America. Anyway, they go to the ball, And at the same time, Queen Nerissa has decided, you know what, if you can't do it, can't have somebody else do it, you have to do it yourself. She comes to the real world. I must say, I can't stand Susan Sarandon in this movie. I think that her live action performance is a choice. Like, there's specifically a moment when she comes into the real world, she's standing in Times Square looking fearsome. She does this weird thing with her tongue that made me think of it. This is an odd comparison, I suppose. If either of you remember Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, David Tennant in that movie has he's making a weird choice with his tongue. And I like David Tennant as an actor. But and I was thinking about it this time, it's like Barty Crouch Jr. in Goblet of Fire. And it makes no sense here to watch. She is like Amy Adams and James Marsden and Timothy Spall all seem to understand the assignment of, yes, I am playing a literal cartoon character in the real world, but I can only go so big before it becomes too outlandish or too cartoonish. I don't think Susan Sarandon grasped that very well, personally, which is unfortunate since she is a big part of the climax. But before we get to her turning into a dragon, because of course she does, we have the scene at the ball where Giselle and Robert share a dance, as Edward and Nancy share a dance, and they do so to a song called So Close, which is written by Alan Menken and Stephen Schwartz, but performed by a dude named John McLaughlin. Now, not the one from the McLaughlin Group, by the way. That's a reference that I don't think anybody else needs to know, but I see that name and I think of the political show. So I mentioned it before. If anybody out there knows World of Color, the nighttime show, you know this song because it plays. I don't know, Scott, is it the full song that they use or just like a large chunk of it in the middle of that soundtrack?
It's pretty significant.
Yes. And if you know this song, you know, it is a romantic ballad, but a slower, kind of a sadder ballad, because you're meant to think these are two characters who are finally understanding their feelings for each other, but also, well, Giselle has Edward, well, Robert has Nancy. Maybe they're not going to be able to have this big moment. They're so close, and yet so far. It's a fine song, and at the same time, I think to myself, it's just really weird that none of the characters in the movie sing this song. Like, even if I think of Beauty and the Beast, the song, not the film, yes, that is not sung by either of the title characters, but it is performed by a character in the movie versus, hey, look, a white guy. He's going to sing the song right now to these characters, and it will speak to their emotions, but they're not the ones actually communicating it. I mentioned earlier, there is a bit near the end where you see McDreamy kind of staggering his way through the song, essentially suggesting Robert is finally embracing that he is falling in love with Giselle. But I don't know, it's a fine song out of context. I actually like it more out of context than in context in the film. What do the two of you think?
Well, I feel like everything you just said about the fact that it's not being sung by any of the characters on screen makes me think, or any of the main characters rather, sorry. It makes me think about a question I've been pondering, which is over the course of film history, the general studio attitude towards musicals has shifted a lot. Like, musicals used to be very, very popular. Now and then there have been phases where it's like, God, what are you talking about? Putting a song in a movie? That's crazy. No one wants to see a song in a movie. And it feels like Enchanted is trying to hit, maybe you gentlemen may know this, may have better insight into this than me as someone who, as you guys study the musical history of Disney. But is this kind of from the era where Disney's teetering towards reluctance to put music, to really produce musicals?
I would say so. Yeah.
It's a little bit in that middle range before Frozen sort of went, oh, we can do this again. So it was a little bit of a fallow period for sure.
Okay. Yeah, because that's what this feels like to me. Like, going back to my earlier point about how this song, this song is a pretty song. It works for the movie. It's got its nods to the Beauty and the Beast song. But again, if you just had Josh Groban sing a Josh Groban hit, it would fundamentally not change the movie all that much. So, but I do think it's a pretty song. is essentially, and I do think that like having it not be sung by the characters on screen feels like a weird nod to this era of like, musicals are becoming more and more anathema to major studios.
So I have a lot of thoughts about this song in particular. And so it's pretty. It's fairly lyrically uninteresting. But as you both noted, the clear analog is the ballroom sequence from Beauty and the Beast. And as Josh knows well from our discussion of that film many times over the years, it is perhaps my favorite piece of filmmaking of any kind ever. That sequence, I think, is literally perfect filmmaking. And part of what makes it perfect is Angela Lansbury's "For the Love of God, How Did She Do It" in one take. Just walk into the studio, boom, nailed it, walked out. And that's what's wrong with this moment is you said, it's just the wrong. It's like if in the movie Beauty and the Beast, they played the Celine Dion and Peabo Bryson version of that instead of the Angela Lansbury version. It's just like somebody playing an easy listening song, but there's no depth of wisdom. There's no, that is what Angela Lansbury's performance did to that. It's somebody it's like, yeah, you're a teapot, but you're also someone who's been through it. You know things, you feel things, and this is just a crooner singing a pretty song. And it's just a damn shame because it makes you realize what can happen if you decide to make a different kind of choice in this. And if you really want to make this a song where you're conveying a really profound moment happening between these two people at this time, you can make a choice between, I'm just going to have it be a pretty song, and I'm going to have the way that song is performed say something more. And it's just a little bit of a bummer that that's what is done with this.
Yeah, I feel like what you described is what good musicals do. And that,
that it's about the performance and the character that's singing the song and not just the song itself.
Yes. And so the song, again, it is what it is. We have the song, it performs, Giselle and Edward, they kind of know they're starting to feel for each other, but Giselle walks away, lets Robert and Nancy have their next moment, and Nerissa shows up once again as an old hag, gives the last apple to Giselle, she bites it, she falls into a deep sleep. Robert realizes that the only thing to wake Giselle up naturally would be true love's kiss, leaving aside the fact that Giselle said, no, I'm not in love with this guy I met yesterday. I'm in love with this guy I met like 3 days ago. That's how true love works, kids. So Edward tries kissing her. It doesn't work. Robert realizes it's got to be him. Edward realizes it too. Nancy even gives permission. Yes, she realizes it. It's definitely not weird that she's like, go ahead, kiss this pretty lady you just met. Not me. I fell in love with this guy I just met after dancing. That would be Edward, of course. They kiss. Everything should be happily ever after, except, of course, Nerissa is furious. She turns into a dragon. Susan Sarandon gets a lot of really lazy one-liners as a talking dragon, bringing Robert up to the top of this tall tower. Giselle becomes the hero. Robert is the damsel in distress. Nerissa is killed. Falls to her death, a la every other Disney villain you can think of. Robert and Giselle kiss. They make up. They are going to fall in love. They get married in the real world. Edward and Nancy fall in love in the world of Andalasia, where they get married. And as we're seeing where all the characters are going to wind up, like Giselle starting a fashion design business, Nathaniel writing an autobiography, which is a funny little bit, all this different stuff. We hear the final song of the film, which is Ever, Ever After, written by Alan Menken and Stephen Schwartz, but performed by Carrie Underwood. And I mention it because I think it's honestly true for both So Close and Ever, Ever After. Both perfectly fine songs, and if I did not know they were written by Menken and Schwartz, I don't think I'd be able to tell. I don't know that this song really has the same playfulness or lyricism that I associate with Menken and Schwartz, or Menken and Ashman, of course. It's okay. It's a perfectly cromulent end credits song, but also it's not that great, I don't think. That's also where the weird relationship I have with the songs is, which is the songs I associate with this are not the final two songs, not just because they're not sung by characters in the film, but because it's like, yeah, these are a little bit more forgettable numbers, I would say. Like, the fact that it's Carrie Underwood singing it, I think I'd always just assumed, right, so, like, either Carrie Underwood wrote it or people she works with wrote it, but no, it was Menken and Schwartz. What do the two of you think of Ever, Ever After?
What's interesting, I was just looking up, when did Carrie Underwood win American Idol? And the answer is 2005. So she got this gig relatively quickly after winning, because, you know, the movie comes out in 2007, but that means that I don't know when she recorded it. But my point is that it wasn't even like a cross promotion thing, because American Idol was a Fox series. It wasn't owned by Disney at that point. So they were just like, you know who we really need to get for our end credit song for our big budget Disney movie is the latest winner of American Idol. The 2000s were a weird time.
Yes, they were.
But yeah, I think everything, I mean, as opposed to other songs on the soundtrack, I'm thinking about the song now, and I could not hum the melody for you, which is not a good sign necessarily but how much of that is the performance? How much of that is the fact that it's not really connected to the movie? It's just a post-credit song, like, you know, or a credit song, not a post-credit song. I keep saying that. But it's a weird thing. It's not the high note you want to end this movie on, especially if you want this movie to be considered a musical.
Yeah, you know, we've talked a lot, obviously, about how some of the other songs in this are really homages to songs from other Disney musicals. And the thing about Ever, Ever After is it does not feel like a song from a Disney musical. It feels like a song from a Disney park. This is one of those songs that they write to play during the fireworks, or it's the Step Into the Magic that was written for the 60th anniversary. It's all of those sort of generically feel good, has lots of words that make you feel like, hey, everything's awesome and you're having a great time, but it doesn't really, it's not deep and it's not meant to be. It's bubblegum, and that's its function. And so it's just, again, it's weird that in a movie that was really about the history of the Disney movies, this feels like something that was written to be part of a park show. It doesn't feel like it was part of this movie or its history.
Yeah, it's okay. It's a bit of a, like, I don't even want to say it's a letdown, but it just feels like, we were talking before, this movie didn't want to fully commit to being a musical. And it's also very odd to me that this was Disney's approach, because while Disney itself may not have been in a big gung-ho musical phase, this was the same year as the aforementioned Hairspray. This was the same year as the Sweeney Todd adaptation. This was a year after Dreamgirls. Musicals had a bit of a boom in that mid-2000s period, and yet Disney did not want to go all in. Now, a
certain kind of musical which was the one that won the original song that year.
Oh, we'll get there. So,
yes.
But good transition. Let's talk about the Oscars, the 80th Academy Awards, honoring the films of 2007. Before I talk about Best Original Song, I do want to reiterate. Here are the nominees for Best Actress in a Leading Role in 2007. I'm not going to mention the winner off the top of my head yet. Your nominees include Cate Blanchett for Elizabeth the Golden Age, Julie Christie for Away From Her, Laura Linney for The Savages, and Elliot Page for Juno. Do either of you know off the top of your head what actress won the Oscar?
Well,
I do, because I cheated and I looked.
Well, that's no fair. So,
and you know by now that I'm aware that this is the homework that we need to do.
But see, I like surprising people. So It's fitting, because this actress would go on to appear in a movie that utilized a song from this movie very heavily a couple years later. That film was Inception. The song was La Vie en Rose. The actress is Marion Cotillard, who won for La Vie en Rose as Edith Piaf. And listen, Julie Christie was amazing in Away From Her. Elliot Page is fine in Juno, a film that I rewatched a few years ago, but boy, does that script not hold up in my opinion. Amy Adams should have won. She should have been nominated. She should have won. Easily much better. And if anybody's out there saying, well, which of those nominees would you take away? Cate Blanchett for
easily, if not two or three.
Right. Especially since I just forgot until looked again. Cate Blanchett got a nomination for supporting actress for her role in I'm Not There. So it's not like she wasn't already being nominated in 2007. Going into the Best Original Song category, now we have talked about this obliquely in past episodes. Enchanted actually made a little bit of history at the Oscars in 2007 because, as mentioned, 3 of its songs were nominated, and it is in fact the last film to have multiple songs nominated in the category. After this year, the Academy made a rule saying that a movie could only have 1 original song nominee. And as Scott just alluded, Enchanted didn't even win. The 3 songs it got nominated for were That's How You Know, Happy Working Song, and So Close, which is, to which I will say, okay. The other nominated song was Raise It Up from a movie called August Rush. Do either of you remember that movie?
I only, when I was looking this up yesterday, and I thought, oh yeah, I saw that, and I could not tell you much more about it.
Boy, is that a weird movie. A movie with a weird cast. You get Kerry Russell, Jonathan Rhys-Meyers in a Mission Impossible 3 reunion. You have Robin Williams. I saw it in theaters, I believe it's like a weird modernized riff on Oliver Twist. Freddie Highmore is the lead character. It's a weird movie. I will say, the song that won 100% deserved to win. In the same vein of Amy Adams should have won the Best Actress Oscar, no questions asked. The song that won, Falling Slowly from Once, is a brilliant piece of music. Definitely deserved to win. I do want to very briefly note, there were a couple of controversies in the original song category that year. I actually went back and rewatched it. Amy Adams only performed 1 of the 3 songs from Enchanted. She sang Happy Working Song. And if you haven't seen her sing that at the Oscars, you might be thinking to yourself, how does that song work when it's a live actor and a lot of CG characters in the movie? Well, at the Oscars, it's Amy Adams pretending to sing to other animals, but nobody is there, and it's just her on the Oscar stage, and it's really weird. You might be thinking then,
you could have had easily like a half dozen dancers in roach costumes.
And it's not that such things have never been done at the Oscars before.
This is true.
Canada. Like, Blake Canada should not have worked on stage, and it was one of the best Oscar performances of all time. Speaking
of Robin Williams, yes, one of the great performances. Now, if you're out there, you're thinking, but wait a second. If she didn't sing That's How You Know, who sang it? Well, Marlon Saunders was there to perform it with, speaking of Wicked, speaking of Stephen Schwartz, Kristen Chenoweth sang it. And she does a fine job because she's Kristen Chenoweth and she's very talented, but I remember there being a little bit of frustration at the time of, why did you saddle Amy Adams with the All on Her Own song, but not the big production number? The other piece that I do want to call out, I remember watching it live and thinking it was very surprising that Jon Stewart basically ignored the orchestra, because Glenn Hansard and Marketa Irglova win for Falling Slowly. They cut Marketa Irglova off before she can speak. He came back out on stage and was like, no, let her go back and finish her speech. I remember that being a really cool, hey, this is actually live TV, anything can happen moment at the Oscars. You know, just like when Will Smith slapped Chris Rock.
You know what? When you were talking about the controversies, I thought you were also going to refer to the fact that Falling Slowly almost wasn't eligible.
That is true, but it was, and it won, and I'm very glad that it won. So that's the Oscar part of it. Now, Scott, I know you like to do this before we wrap. Any notable covers of any of the songs that we've talked about here?
Actually, before we move on from the
Oscar,
I want to ask one quick question.
Go for it.
Let's say, hypothetically, that Amy Adams had been nominated for Best Actress. Like, you know, Cate Blanchett missed that one luncheon that would have pushed her over the edge, and Amy Adams gets in, but she doesn't win. Would that be more frustrating to you or less frustrating to you?
That's a good. I think it would only be less. It'd be only more frustrating if we still live in the same world where Amy Adams has still never won an Oscar. Which, again, honestly, of the various roles she's had, it's honestly wilder to me that she didn't get nominated for Arrival, because that movie did very well at the Oscars, if I recall correctly. And I mean, I don't know what the two of you think, but I think that's an excellent, I think that's Denis Villeneuve's best film. I think that's one of her best performances. I'm looking right now to see, because I want to remind myself how many Oscar nominations she has gotten. So she's been nominated six times.
I remember Junebug being the first.
So she's been nominated 6 times. Junebug, Doubt, The Fighter, The Master, American Hustle, and Vice. And if I'm being honest, 2 of those performances deserve nominations. Doubt and The Master. With the caveat, I have not seen Junebug.
Junebug deserved it.
Okay, fair enough. But I like the fact that she didn't get a nomination for Arrival is still kind of mind-blowing, especially since I'm looking it up now. So the nominees in 2016, Emma Stone wins for La La Land, which I get, fine. Isabelle Huppert for Elle, Ruth Negga for Loving, Natalie Portman for Jackie, and Meryl Streep for Florence Foster Jenkins. And again, no shade against Meryl Streep. Take that performance out and put Amy Adams in there for Arrival. That would have been a much more apt nomination. I think it's, to your question, Liz, I think it's very sad that she's not won an Oscar yet, because one could argue, as it's funny that we're talking about this now. Here's how long Scott and I have been doing this podcast. I remember in one of our first episodes, we had Louis Peitzman on as a guest, and in that episode, he mentioned, as I guess the equivalent of an exclusive, that he was starting a podcast called Chasing Amy Adams, where he was going to talk with a co-host about every one of her performances. He has now finished the Amy Adams show. They're doing a Chasing Gwyneth Paltrow show. And Louis, I'm open for the Royal Tenenbaums episode. One of my favorite movies of all time. I will happily talk about Margot Tenenbaum. My point, though, is that's like I feel like we talked at least offline. She's somehow done a lot of movies now where it feels like I'm trying to get an Academy Award. Think about Hillbilly Elegy, where she co-starred with fellow I'm trying to get an Academy Award actress, Glenn Close. Right? Like, it sometimes feels like some of her later movies are, I want the Oscar. And she's been nominated enough where you kind of think, she's long since earned it. But I just don't know when it's going to happen, because I'm looking at her upcoming films. She's in a movie called At the Sea later this year. She's in a movie called Clara and the Sun, directed by Taika Waititi. And then
which I just read, and is it's a Kazuo Ishiguro novel.
Well, I'm sure that Taika Waititi will bring great grace and maturity to it.
So deeply afraid.
And then next year, she's going to be in a movie that I'm sure will be an Academy Award favorite. You know what that movie is?
No.
Oh, I get to surprise you finally. That movie is called Star Wars Starfighter.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Because everybody loved The Mandalorian and Grogu so much.
Taking the Sigourney Weaver role, apparently, I guess.
Perhaps.
The obligatory veteran.
I mean, I feel like Starfighter is going to be a very different thing, and it's coming from
I hope, yes.
noted auteur Scott Levy. So
yeah.
I shouldn't speak ill of it. It's got Ryan Gosling in it. I am sat, as the kids say.
I don't think I've heard that one yet. But anyway, so Liz, I don't know if that answered your question. I wish that she had gotten the Oscar for either Enchanted or Arrival. That's my opinion.
What you picked up on in the question was kind of the underlying, if this is just yet another nomination in Amy Adams' long history of never winning Oscars, would you get more furious or not? So thank you. You've answered it. So very...
Fair enough. So, Scott, covers. Yes. Anything that you spotted of note?
And just as a brief intro for those who are either new to the show or have been, we've been on a little bit of a hiatus, that I do like looking to see if there are covers, just because to me it's indicative of whether songs work well outside of the context of the movie in which they appear. And for a lot of the Disney songs, not surprisingly, they've appeared on compilations and of various kinds. You'll also, of course, find plenty of YouTube videos of generic, you've never heard of them before, people doing their Disney versions. The one version of this that I really was able to find, and it did appear on one of those, here's all of our Disney, Disney Channel pop stars doing songs, was Demi Lovato doing That's How You Know.
Huh.
And it is, again, talking about it is a choice. This is a rockin' version. It is electric guitar. It is solos and jamming out. And it is, with trying to do that like it's, I don't know, early Joan Jett kind of a vibe to it. And it's like, no. And so I think this is why you can understand that you take this song out of the context of that production number and sort of that joyousness, and you're like, this is an edgy song about falling in love, and it's no, sorry, false choice.
Okay, good to know.
So not recommended.
Fair enough. All right. Well, I think that's it in terms of my opinion. Any final thoughts either of you wanted to share, or are we ready to wrap this up?
I'm just looking forward to Disenchanted because that will be a very different conversation.
It will be. And I'll tell you, back at the time, a character we didn't talk about here because he doesn't sing is Pip, the squirrel. I remember at the time interviewing the actor who plays Pip in Disenchanted, friend of our old show, Griffin Newman of Blank Check with Griffin and David. He voices Pip in that movie. And as I believe I got to share with him during my interview with him that his musical performance in the opening song, it's actually him singing. And he had explained to me afterwards that he had recorded the song, but he wasn't quite sure, like Adam Shankman directed that movie, and he wasn't sure if that was going to pass the smell test or if they were going to get somebody in to sing for him. But no, it's him singing in that movie. But anyway, yes, it will be a very interesting discussion whenever we do talk about Disenchanted. But anyway, I think, Scott, you can – oh, go ahead, Liz.
Yeah, so I just had a couple – my final notes, just looking at the random notes I took while I was watching the movie. I wanted to call shouting out baby's first credit card fraud. Morgan's decision to steal her dad's credit card so that she could buy Giselle new clothes. Great. I also do not understand. I don't know how many balls you guys have been to. I have never been to a ball where, so at one point I am instructed to dance with someone who's not my partner. Like, that's weird to me. I can't imagine why that was the story element. Oh, wait. It makes the story go. I understand. I'm just saying it was dumb. And
yes.
Yeah. To end on a positive note, I am always a sucker for an aspect ratio change.
Yes.
Transition from one world to the other. And
yep.
I was very glad that the Disney Plus streaming version preserved that.
It does, and yes, I agree. I am always pro aspect ratio shift. This movie does play around that a little bit. Completely agreed. But yeah, I think that's it for Enchanted then. So Scott, why don't you take us out?
So with that, it's time to turn down the volume on Mousterpiece Melodies. What's on the playlist for our next episode? From 1996, Evita. And while you wait, make sure you subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you download your podcasts. Liz, thank you so much for being on the show today. I know we mentioned your credits at the top of the show, but as a reminder, can you please let listeners know the best places to find you online?
Yes, you can find me on Blue Sky at lizshannonmiller.com. I'm all fancy with my custom URL. Mm-hmm. You can also find me at Consequence, as mentioned, consequence.net, where I write about movies and TV shows and occasionally even music. And then one thing I do for Consequence that I always like to shout out is I write a weekly streaming recommendations newsletter called Stream On. It is something I've been doing. I'm coming up on my 200th issue, which is wild. Wow. But, yeah, if you want more information about that, you can go to consequence.net it's like consequence.net/stream-on. And that'll take you there. You can subscribe and get fun recommendations for what to watch every weekend for free.
Awesome. And of course, we'd love for all of you to listen along with us. Tell us what you think. Do you love the songs of Enchanted? Are you a Queen Nerissa? Do you hate them? If you have any comments, questions, or opinions you'd like to share, you can always reach me at mousterpiececinema@gmail.com. And as noted before, you can follow me on Blue Sky at Mousterpiece. Every single day I am posting new matchups in the Ultimate Disney Animation Songs bracket. I should note, Enchanted songs are not included because that's not a fully animated film. I'm only talking about songs from fully animated Disney animation films. As I have noted on Blue Sky, some people are realizing what is a Disney movie and what is a Pixar movie. So if you're looking for songs from Toy Story or Coco or the like, you're not going to find them. But anyway, that's where you can find me online. Scott, where can our listeners find you on the internet?
You can find me for my primary outlet, Salt Lake City Weekly, is cityweekly.net, where I provide capsules and feature reviews, including probably coming up. When are we going to be up for this episode, Josh?
I am hoping that this will be up on Monday, June 1st. So we're talking about the week of June 5th, I'm guessing.
And coming up that week, Speaking as We Were of Once, the new feature from its filmmaker John Carney, Power Ballad. You can also find me on Letterboxd at Scott Renshaw. You can find me on Blue Sky at Scott Renshaw. And I'm Scott Renshaw.
And I'm Josh Spiegel, and we'll see you all next time on Mousterpiece Melodies.